Before the shots, before the diss tracks, before the world split into two camps, Drake fans versus Kendrick fans, there was mutual respect, mutual admiration, maybe even the early signs of a promising alliance between two of the most talented rappers of their generation. In 2011, Kendrick Lamar appeared on Drake's Take Care, contributing a powerful interlude that introduced many mainstream listeners to his voice. At that time, Drake was already a superstar, and Kendrick was the underground prodigy from Compton gaining momentum. There was no beef, only recognition. But tension in hip-hop is rarely loud at first. It brews. In 2013, the first crack appeared. Kendrick dropped a verse that would change the landscape of rap competitiveness. Control. It wasn't even his song, it was Big Sean's. But Kendrick's feature stole the show. He didn't just out-rap everyone on the track. He named names: Drake, J. Cole, A.P. Rocky, Meek Mill, Big K.R.I.T. Mac Miller. He called them out, not with malice, but with challenge. "I'm trying to murder you sandwiches." That line echoed across the culture. It was a lyrical declaration of war, but one rooted in the essence of hip-hop. Competition, iron sharpens iron. Kendrick wasn't dissing Drake. He was daring him to respond. Drake didn't take it well. In interviews following the verse, Drake downplayed it. He called it an ambitious thought and said it was not that memorable. But the energy had shifted. Underneath the polite responses, you could hear something cracking, something unspoken. From that moment on, the two would never share a track again. Over the next few years, the jabs grew more subtle, more layered. Drake dropped the language later in 2013. Many fans interpreted it as a light response to Control, with lines like, "I don't know why they've been lying, but your shat is not that inspiring." Kendrick fired back at the BET Hip Hop Awards cypher that same year, delivering a now iconic freestyle. And nothing's been the same since they dropped Control and tucked a sensitive rapper back in his pajama clothes. That was a clear shot at Nothing Was the Same, Drake's 2013 album. Still, this wasn't a full-blown beef. It was tension, artistic rivalry, subtext in lyrics. Drake kept winning commercially, Kendrick kept rising critically, but no one had drawn real blood. Yet. Between 2014 and 2022, the two remained in orbit, close enough to be compared, far enough to avoid direct confrontation. Fans speculated constantly. Was the Heart Part 4 aimed at Drake? Was Duppy Freestyle a veiled warning to Kendrick? Did Drake purposely exclude Kendrick from the Big Three narrative? The speculation became a genre of its own, but neither artist ever stepped fully into the ring. That changed in 2023. On March 22, 2023, Future and Metro Boomin dropped Like That, featuring Kendrick Lamar. The verse was explosive, not just in delivery, but in content. Kendrick said plainly, "Motherfuck the Big Three no says, it's just Big Me." He wasn't just challenging Drake and J. Cole, he was erasing them. In one line, Kendrick broke a decade-long silence, and he did it on a track not even from his own project. That move alone sent shockwaves through the industry. Kendrick, the reserved, strategic, artistic rapper, had just thrown a grenade in the middle of hip-hop's most delicate balance. Drake had to respond, and he did. Slowly, methodically, he began with indirects. In songs like Search and Rescue and Red Button, Drake started planting seeds. He criticized anonymous puppets, mocked the idea of artistic purity, and questioned Kendrick's silence during major moments. But the real explosion came in 2024. Drake dropped Push-Ups, a direct diss track where he mocked Kendrick's height, his sporadic release schedule, and even his place in the culture. Then came Family Matters, a darker, more aggressive record filled with insinuations about Kendrick's personal life, including his longtime partner Whitney and their family. The gloves were off. Kendrick responded with precision. First came Euphoria. It was cinematic, introspective, violent in tone, yet elegant in construction. He dismantled Drake's image piece by piece, questioning his authenticity, calling him a culture vulture, accusing him of hiding behind branding and algorithms. But he wasn't done. Just days later, Kendrick dropped Not Like Us, and the internet exploded. Not Like Us wasn't just a diss track, it was a cultural moment. The beat slapped, the hook repeated like a mantra. The insults were sharp, surgical, and deeply personal. Kendrick accused Drake of being predatory, manipulative, and fake. The track didn't just win in lyrics, it won in spirit. Clubs played it, TikToks exploded, parties, weddings, even political rallies blasted the song. It became an anthem of anti-Drake sentiment. And just like that, the decade-long Cold War had become a hot, public, no-holds-barred battle. The beef wasn't just about music anymore. It was about legacy, about ideology, about the future of hip-hop. By mid-2024, the battle lines had been drawn. No more cryptic bars or indirects. Drake and Kendrick were locked in one of the most explicit and publicized rap feuds of the 21st century. It wasn't just about bars. It had become a war of strategies, cultural dominance, and personal attacks. With each diss track, the stakes rose, and what began as a lyrical competition turned into a brutal, multi-layered confrontation with no sign of reconciliation. After the nuclear impact of Not Like Us, Kendrick Lamar had seized control of the cultural narrative. He hadn't just released a diss track, he had crafted an anthem. The instrumental, laced with West Coast bounce, was infectious. And the repetition of the phrase, "He's not like us," became a rallying cry online and offline. The song transcended hip-hop circles. It played in clubs, gym playlists, weddings, and even political rallies. It wasn't just a song anymore. It was a public verdict. Drake, on the other hand, found himself in uncharted waters. Throughout his career, he had been involved in multiple beefs, Meek Mill, Pusha T, Kanye West, but he always managed to maintain control. He had an uncanny ability to absorb criticism, spin the narrative, and come out stronger. But this time was different. Kendrick wasn't playing by industry rules. He wasn't dropping subliminals or waiting for a rollout. He was striking with precision, and the public was watching closely. Following Not Like Us, Drake responded with The Heart Part 6, a calculated counterstrike. In it, he accused Kendrick of deflection, of relying on cultural support instead of facts. He doubled down on previous claims, suggesting manipulation, secrets, and contradictions in Kendrick's personal and artistic life. But the problem wasn't the content, it was the tone. Drake's approach felt defensive, even desperate, compared to Kendrick's raw power and clarity. Critics noticed, so did the fans. And then Drake made a bold move. He filed a legal complaint, accusing Kendrick and his team of defamation. According to leaked reports, the complaint cited several lines in Not Like Us as damaging to Drake's public image and business interests. This sparked outrage in the hip-hop community. For many, it was a betrayal of the culture. Rap battles were supposed to be settled with mics, not courtrooms. Fans flooded social media with memes, calling Drake the first rapper to call HR in a beef. Kendrick, always a master of silence, didn't respond with another song. He didn't need to. The damage was done. The culture had already crowned him the winner. But the beef wasn't dead. It simply evolved. As summer 2024 approached, the energy shifted from diss tracks to implications, media coverage, and subtle jabs through performances and interviews. At Rolling Loud, Kendrick closed his set with Not Like Us, extending the final hook into a full-blown chant. The crowd, tens of thousands, joined in unison, repeating, "He's not like us," while Kendrick stood still, hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning the sea of people. It was more than a concert. It was a coronation. Drake, meanwhile, faced backlash during his tour. In Atlanta, a group of fans held up signs reading, "We chose Kendrick." In New York, he was booed after playing push-ups. For the first time in his career, Drake wasn't untouchable. He had become the subject of ridicule, something he had carefully avoided for over a decade. But he wasn't finished. In an interview with the Rap Caviar podcast, Drake spoke openly about the feud. He denied any wrongdoing, defended his lyrical content, and subtly criticized Kendrick for weaponizing victimhood. He claimed the legal action was necessary to protect his family and brand. But no matter how articulate or composed he was, the tide had turned. The culture had made up its mind. This wasn't about who rhymed better. It was about who stood for what. underneath all of this was a deeper philosophical clash. Drake represented globalization, accessibility, crossover success. He was hip-hop's pop star, the guy who made chart-topping hits, collaborated across genres, and expanded rap into new territories. Kendrick was the guardian of essence. He stood for introspection, community, resistance. He didn't just make music, he made statements. That's why this beef mattered. It wasn't just about Kendrick and Drake. It was about the future of hip-hop itself. What would define the next era? Marketability or authenticity? Quantity or impact? Branding or message? Every bar, every beat, every public appearance became a vote in that debate. And while Kendrick maintained silence after Not Like Us, his allies spoke volumes. Schoolboy Q, J-Rock, and other TDE affiliates began posting cryptic messages online. Even artists like Baby Keem, who typically remained apolitical in hip-hop conflicts, liked posts favoring Kendrick's side. The industry knew what was happening. Lines were being drawn, careers were being repositioned. Meanwhile, Drake continued to release music, singles, freestyles, and guest features. But none of them gained traction. They weren't bad, but they weren't essential. And in the post-Not Like Us era, the public had recalibrated its standards. If your track didn't say something, it didn't matter. As fall 2024 approached, Kendrick was seen less in public. Rumors spread that he was working on a new album, possibly his final one. Others claimed he was in talks with major streaming platforms for a documentary covering the entire saga. Whether true or not, the mystique only added to his power. Drake, now somewhat isolated, focused on business. He invested in a new sports media company, launched another clothing line, and teased a memoir. But every public move was met with reminders, tweets, comments, memes. The shadow of Kendrick loomed large. By the time 2025 arrived, it was clear. This wasn't just a feud, it was a generational schism. And Kendrick Lamar had won the cultural war. But was the battle really over? Or was it just paused, waiting for the next shot to be fired? As 2025 unfolds, the dust from the Drake versus Kendrick war hasn't fully settled. In fact, it might never settle. What began as lyrical sparring transformed into a cultural referendum, one that touched every corner of hip-hop, exposed the fragility of reputations, and forced an entire generation to rethink its heroes. The echoes of this conflict still linger in every bar, every interview, every tweet. It redefined what a rap beef could be. Today, Kendrick Lamar walks through the industry not as a combatant, but as a victor. Not because he dropped the most diss tracks, but because he delivered the most decisive blows. His silence has become his loudest statement. Since Not Like Us, he hasn't released another song, no interviews, no live rants, no Instagram tirades, just a calculated withdrawal into the shadows. An artistic mic drop that left the world arguing over a track that still plays in rotation like a top 40 hit. But if Kendrick won the cultural moment, what about Drake? He didn't disappear. Drake remains active, dropping singles, making business moves, showing up courtside at basketball games, maintaining his social presence. Yet something has changed. His aura, once impenetrable, now seems vulnerable. He's no longer the untouchable hit machine that critics couldn't touch. The man who once wore criticism like Teflon now seems to flinch at every mention of the word puppet, every owl meme, every veiled jab at his credibility. And that's where the damage truly lives, not in sales or stats, but in perception. Because perception is everything in hip-hop. The streets might not care about billboard placements if they don't feel your presence. And right now, it's Kendrick whose name carries that gravity. The diss tracks aren't just music. They're a record of power, of dominance, of who dictated the narrative when it mattered most. Still, it's important to recognize that this feud wasn't just about insults. Beneath the surface, it reflected a deeper battle within the culture itself. Kendrick represented a return to depth, to message-driven rap that values clarity, critique, and community. Drake, in contrast, embodied modern versatility, a chameleon of sound, bridging R&B, trap, Afrobeat, and even pop with massive commercial appeal. Their conflict was inevitable. Their coexistence had a limit. industry veterans began weighing in. Nas praised Kendrick for standing on artistic principle. Charlemagne Tha God labeled Not Like Us the ether of this generation. Joe Budden, who had often criticized Drake harshly in the past, called the beef a cultural realignment. Even Pusha T, Drake's longtime nemesis, posted cryptic emojis during the height of the battle, signaling solidarity without a single verse. The fans, however, were divided. Some refused to let go of Drake's legacy, reminding everyone that he broke records no other rapper could dream of. Others pointed to Kendrick's near-universal critical acclaim and claimed that his artistry had eclipsed any commercial metric. Entire YouTube channels emerged to dissect every lyric, every cadence, every potential double entendre in the diss tracks. TikTok creators reenacted lines. Academics debated the cultural impact in op-eds. The beef became bigger than the beef. Even the younger generation of rappers felt the weight. Artists like Cordae, Denzel Curry, and even Lil Baby began referencing the feud in interviews, discussing which side they leaned toward and how it influenced their own approach to lyrics and branding. It became clear. This wasn't just a moment, it was a milestone. In the months that followed, rumors swirled about a possible reconciliation. Photoshopped images of Drake and Kendrick shaking hands circulated online, sparking debates about whether it was time to move on. But insiders close to both camps dismissed the idea. The wounds were too fresh, too real, too embedded in their legacies. This wasn't Kanye versus 50 Cent. This wasn't Meek Mill versus Drake. This was something deeper. It wasn't staged. It wasn't a PR stunt. It was war, and wars leave scars. Drake, to his credit, hasn't bowed out. He continues to tease new projects, hinting at a shift in sound, perhaps something more introspective. Some believe he's entering his 444th era, a reference to Jay-Z's late-career self-reflective album. Others believe Drake will pivot completely, doubling down on the mainstream, avoiding lyrical warfare entirely, and focusing solely on global domination. But Kendrick remains a ghost. There are whispers about a new album, of course. There always are. Some say it'll be called Requiem. Others believe he'll retire and become a producer, mentor, or activist. The truth is, nobody knows, and that's exactly how Kendrick likes it. In a world saturated with content, his scarcity is power. When he moves, the world stops. And after the bomb he dropped with Not Like Us, everyone is still standing in the crater. Meanwhile, the legal drama lingers in the background. Drake's team has gone quiet on the defamation case, and no formal proceedings have materialized. Industry analysts believe it was more of a warning shot than a serious legal strategy. But the damage to Drake's reputation within the culture remains. You don't threaten lawsuits over bars, not in a genre born from battling in the streets and on the mic. So, where does the story end? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's still being written in every tweet, every verse, every interview, where an artist gets asked, Drake or Kendrick. Maybe it lives in the way artists structure their albums now, more cohesive, more introspective, more confrontational. Maybe it lives in the discomfort of fans who once saw Drake as invincible and now have to wrestle with the idea that he might have been outclassed, not just in bars, but in impact. Or maybe it lives in silence, in Kendrick's refusal to explain, to tour, to speak, choosing instead to let the music and the culture speak for him. One thing is certain, this was not a beef. It was a shift. A moment in time that reminded hip-hop of what it could be. Sharp, dangerous, poetic, unfiltered, real. And in the end, it wasn't about who won. It was about what we learned.